first speaker is going to be Eddie, and Delia is going to be evaluating Eddie. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yes. I'm going to read the purpose and the objectives. The purpose of an interpretive reader is to communicate throughout voice the work of an author. The interpretive reader's goal is to so enthrall the audience with a story that the audience isn't even aware of the reader. The reader makes the story come alive. The objectives: to understand the elements of interpretive reading, to learn how to analyze a narrative and plan for effective interpretation, to learn and apply vocal techniques that will aid in the effectiveness of the reading. Time 8 to 10 minutes.
Please help me welcome Eddie.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests. Today I'll be reading a story by Mark Twain. He was a famous American author in the 1800s. And this is an excerpt from his story about a blue jay, and Jim Baker was a man who could understand blue jays. So I will begin. Animals talk to each other, of course. There can be no question about that. But I suppose there are very few people who can understand them. I never knew but one man who could. I knew he could, however, because he told me so himself. He was a middle-aged, simple-hearted miner who lived in the lonely corner of California. Among the woods and mountains, a good many years, he had studied the ways of only neighbors, the birds and the bees, until he believed that he could accurately translate any remarks which they made. This was Jim Baker. According to Jim Baker, some animals have a limited education and use very simple and sacredly words, even a comparison or a flowery figure, whereas certain animals have a very large vocabulary, a fine command of language, a readily and fluent delivery. Consequently, these animals talk a great deal. They like it. They are consciously of their talent, and they enjoy showing off. Baker said that after long and careful observation, he had come to the conclusion that blue jays were the best talkers he had found among the birds and the beasts. Said he, "There's more to a blue jay than any other creature. He's got more moods and got more different kinds of feelings than any other creature. And mind you, whatever a blue jay feels, he can put it into language. And no mere commonplace language, either by rattling or out-and-out book talk, and bristling with metaphor too. Just bristling. As for command of language, why, you never see a blue jay get stuck for a word. No man ever did. They just boil out of it. And another thing, I noticed a good deal. There's no bird or cow or anything that uses as good grammar as a blue jay. You may say a cat uses good grammar. Well, a cat does, but you let a cat get excited once, you let a cat get to pulling fur with another cat on a shed night, and you will hear grammar that will give you lockjaw. Ignorant people think it's noise, which is fighting cats, which makes them so aggravating, but it ain't so. It's the sickening grammar they use. Now, I never heard a jay use bad grammar, but very seldomly, when they do, they are as ashamed as a human. They shut right down and leave. You may call a jay a bird. Well, so he is, in a measure. But he's got feathers on him and doesn't belong to no church. Perhaps. But otherwise, he is just as much as human as you be. I'll tell you what. A jay's gift and instincts and feelings and interests cover the whole ground. A jay hasn't got any more principle than a congressman. A jay will lie, a jay will steal, a jay will deceive, a jay will betray, and 4 out of 5 times a jay will go back on his solemnest promise. The sacredness of an obligation is a thing which you can't cram into a blue jay's head. Now, on top of all this, there's one thing a jay can outswear any gentleman in the mines. You think a cat can swear? Well, a cat can, but you give a blue jay a subject that calls for his reserve powers, and where's your cat? Don't talk to me. I know too much about this thing. In one particular scolding. Just good, clean, out-and-out scolding. A blue jay can lay over anything, human or divine. Yes, sir, a jay is everything that a man is. A jay can cry, a jay can laugh, a jay can feel ashamed, a jay can reason and plan and discuss. A jay likes gossip and scandal. A jay's got a sense of humor. A jay knows when he's an ass just as well as you do. Maybe better. If a jay ain't human, you better take in his sign. That's all. I'm going to tell you about a perfectly true fact about some blue jays. When I first began to understand blue jays correctly, there was a little incident that happened. 7 years ago, the last man in this region but me moved away. There stands his house. Been empty ever since. A log house with a plank roof. Just one big room, no more, no ceiling, nothing between the rafts and the floor. Well, one Sunday morning I was sitting here in front of my cabin with my cat, taking the sun and looking at the blue hills, listening to the leaves rustle in the lonely trees and thinking of the home away yonder in the States that I hadn't heard from in 13 years, when all of a sudden a blue jay lit that house with an acorn in his mouth and says, "Hello, I reckon I struck something." When he spoke, the acorn dropped out of his mouth, rolled down the roof, of course, but he didn't care. His mind was all on the thing that he had struck. It was a knothole in the roof. When he cocked his head to one side, shut one eye, and put the other one in the hole like a possum looking down in a jug, then he glanced up with his bright eyes, gave a wink or two with his wings, which signifies gratification, you understand, and says, "It looks like a hole is located like a hole. Blame it if I don't believe it is a hole." Mr. Toastmaster.
Okay. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Tim Wilson.